Okay, so we're putting in the Johnson low travel lifters are already in the engine, the head's torqued on. This is the final setup. And it's important to get the preload correct. So on this engine, it's 30 thousandths plus or minus 5 is the preload that we want, and I'll explain to you what that means as we put it in. So on this engine setup, I would call the nominal push rod length of 8.500 inches. So we're going to start with that. We set that down in the hole. You kind of wiggle a little bit to make sure that the push rod is seated within the lifter. Then we take the rocker arm, and you do need to number all these. Now we will number these going forward, so I do a simple 1 through 16 as opposed to 1 intake, 1 exhaust, 2 intake, 2 exhaust, just because if I have somebody helping me, it's just a little bit easier to say when we're putting it back together, 1 through 8, 9 through 16 in order. So then we just have this little gun turned all the way down so we're not getting any torque on it whatsoever. And back that off a little bit. So what you want to do is ensure that you're getting pretty much the no load condition. So finger tight on the fastener. And this is a 1.2 millimeter pitch thread. So what that means is every 1 degree is about 13 10,000ths of an inch of preload. So if you do the math, it comes out pretty easy. If you're between 180 degrees and 270 degrees of rotation, before you get to the torque setting, and I use 23.5 foot-pounds, you are good to go and you'll fall within that preload specification. So we put this in, I'm turning it, I'm 180, I'm 270, I'm 360, I'm 450 degrees. So this would not work, right? So I have way too much preload on here. So I'm going to need to put in a shorter push rod to remove that preload. Now we're going to go put in a shorter push rod and we'll see how that comes out. Okay, so we went and grabbed a shorter push rod. This one is 10 thousandths shorter. It's a 4.90 inch push rod. And we're going to set this in. Again, it's critical when you do this that you have to be on the base circle of the load. So we got that set. Wiggle it a little bit to make sure that it is seated in the cup of the lifter. I run that down to get it close. And then this last part, you do need just to be extra, it's kind of a feel thing, but when you feel it start to get snug, that you know you have like 0 lash, that's where you need that 180 to 270 degrees of rotation. Here you go, see how this push rod length works. Okay, and that came in almost exactly halfway between our 180 and 270 degrees of rotation. So this has got pretty much spec on 30 thousandths preload. So as you can see, it's a bit tedious process. You have to buy, multiple length push rods. For me, who do a lot of these, not a big deal if you're doing one. My suggestion is you buy 12 8/500ths, and then maybe you buy 2 or 3 of each step, going to 15 thousandths less and 15 thousandths more. You have a couple extra push rods, but that's not going to hurt anybody. Okay, so we went through a few things today. We're anxious to get that silver car back on the road with the twin turbos, with the automatic in it. But we also, more importantly to me, is sharing the things that you need to do to make them reliable when you start to pick up horsepower again. We had that lifter issue. That's on the boosted engines with an aggressive profile, and it's important to know what you need to do to keep that reliable. Likewise for the oil pan, we don't want anybody running out of oil pressure and having issues, so it's important to share that content. And again, on the REVan channel, stay tuned for the content. We want to bring you all the wonderful successes when things go extremely well, but we think the most important thing is to bring the learning experiences. So hopefully that was a little lesson that will help you as you're putting your Godzilla together.